Hey, everybody, welcome to Outlier on Air, episode 421. This is the podcast where we talk to the founders, disruptors, and mavens of the world. As always, I'm your host, Aver Gonzalez. Thanks for being with us. On today's episode, we have Imogen Lehtonen. She's a silversmith, model, and the reluctant ambassador to the female biker culture. On today's episode, you're going to find out what makes Imogen an outlier. She was born in London, raised in New Zealand, and is now living in Los Angeles. We talk about her family business, The Great Frog, a very famous jewelry shop that she now runs out of LA. We also talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of being on the very first episode of a very popular show, Ride with Norman Reedus. Of course, Norman Reedus being one of the main characters on The Walking Dead. Imogen is a true outlier, and I really think you're going to like her style, and her philosophy on life. Take a listen. Imogen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're looking forward to talking to you today because I think you fit the mold when it comes to the guests that we have and the audience that kind of listens to us. We reach out to people that are kind of doing their own thing in life and are having a good time and are very passionate about it. So thank you for accepting our invitation to be on the show.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, so before we get started, for our audience, we're going to talk about your shop. We're going to talk about where you come from, what you're doing now, the modeling, the bike culture, and everything in between. But before we really get into that, let's talk about what makes you an outlier.
All right. Well, I'd say what makes me an outlier would be, I guess at a certain point, after high school, after my teen years, which were kind of a bit lost for me, I went through some stuff that sort of made me stop thinking so much, I guess, logically about the decisions I made and where I was going and what I was doing, and just really started listening to my gut and my intuition. And I sort of threw everything up in the air and just without really knowing how things would work out, I just started following from a different place. I stopped trying to overthink things, and as soon as I started doing that, I think things sort of fell into place for me, and I really figured out who I was, and ever since then I feel like I know myself very well, and I really don't put a lot of thought into into the path that I'm on. I just really do what feels right for me, and it's led me to some really cool places.
I love that answer. Let's dig into it a little bit more, because that could be scary, what you just described, right? So
It is.
I think society-wise, we're like, go to school, graduate, get a job, right? Get married,
Right.
all that good stuff, which
Right.
nothing wrong with that, obviously.
For
But
sure. And I did a lot of those things,
yeah,
realizing they weren't right for me.
yeah. And so as a young person, right, what gave you the strength to kind of just throw your hands up in the air and say, I'm going to go a different route? I mean, because again, that could be very, very scary for most people.
I think I was lucky in the fact that my family life was really incredible. I had a really close family, and I grew up in a place just quite isolated, New Zealand. It's a small country, and it is quite, people follow the rules. You kind of do what's expected of you, and there was pressure to sort of follow all those normative kind of steps that people take, and it wasn't working out for me. I kind of never fit in high school. I never really felt that I fit in New Zealand. And when my sort of high school years-long serious relationship ended, I left New Zealand by myself when I was 19 and traveled around the world for a year. And that really just changed my perspective and opened up my world. Thinking back, I was a whole different person when I was 19, but that really shaped my future. I think I came back to New Zealand and realized the world is so much bigger, and I want to see and do more.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if, do you feel like you have I don't know, an advantage to other young people, others that are trying to find their way and doing their own thing, right? Because born in London, if I did my research right, raised in
Yes.
New Zealand, and then now you're in LA, right?
Yes.
You're all over the world,
Right.
and seeing different cultures, different ways of life.
Right.
Did that help you? Did that kind of scare
Oh,
you a little bit?
definitely. I mean, I went to school and university with people in New Zealand who, had never left the country, and they were happy to like find a guy in their little neighborhood, teach at a school down the road and never leave that town, and they would be happy to do that. And those are direct words coming from people's mouths, and that always was terrifying to me. I've always been hungry for new places and new things. I don't like my life to be stagnant. I don't like routine. And again, I grew up in a very small place, so I was very hungry to see things outside of that. I never felt that I fit in, so I was searching for something.
Okay. I want to get into the shop and your dad and how all this came about. But as you were kind of finding yourself, as you were traveling, what led you to end up in LA? I mean, you can pick anywhere in the world, really. Why LA?
Right. Well, I actually really disliked LA. I hadn't spent any time in Los Angeles except on family trips. Basically, all of my holidays growing up in New Zealand were going to see my paternal grandmother and my aunts in Florida, where my father grew up. So I'm lucky that although I was born in the UK, my dad applied for us, me and my siblings, to have a US passport, knowing how difficult it would be to live there if we weren't born there.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, we would pass through LA to get to Florida. I mean, it was, since I was a baby, every couple of years, we would go to Florida. And from New Zealand, you would have to fly the 15 hours to Los Angeles, wait,
Crazy.
get on another plane, and another 6 hours to Florida. And so my only experiences of Los Angeles were like these one day spent there, sort of traffic and crazy people. And, I never thought I'm not a city person. I never thought it would be somewhere I'd end up. It's actually, it's actually a pretty interesting story of how I ended up in LA. It's actually a past relationship. Partner sort of wanted to pursue music over here, and I figured, like, why not? I'll come and sort of help make that happen. And then I never left.
How long
That
ago was that?
relationship ended for a good reason, but I was 20. That was nine years ago that I started making moves out here, and I guess I officially moved out here 8 years ago.
And what is your relationship to LA now? I mean, like it, hate it, in between?
It's a love-hate thing. I love
For
it
sure.
in a lot of ways. I can't imagine being anywhere else for now. I don't really know where home is, but it's opened so many doors for me, so many opportunities. I've met great people. I mean, again, comparing it to where I grew up, there is an atmosphere of you can achieve anything here. I think it really, I think my self-confidence changed a lot when I came out here. I think New Zealand is known for this thing. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called tall poppy syndrome. And it's kind of like there's this sort of underlying air of like there's only a certain amount of success going around, and people kind of cut each other down when you're doing well, or you're kind of excited, or you have a new idea, or you have an entrepreneurial attitude. People are a little bit, come on, get back down with the crowd. What are you doing? You can't do that kind of thing. So I think once I got out here and I kind of, things were happening, and I just felt that everything was at my fingertips and I could achieve so much more, and it really opened my eyes.
It's funny. I grew up in LA, lived in Long Beach for quite a while, and then before we moved up here to Utah. So obviously I know it, I love it. It's my city, but I also have a love-hate relationship with it.
Right.
Right. The traffic, some of the craziness that goes on there, but overall it's a great place. And it's funny because
it teaches you a lot.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And with what we know about you and the things that you're doing and the things that you've done, that looks like a perfect place for you too right now.
Right. In some ways, but I guess I'm a very private person. I think from what people see of me, on Instagram or in articles or various things I've been in, isn't the full picture. I keep a lot of my life to myself. And I did grow up in a barefoot, no TV, kind of green, beautiful place, and I've still got that kind of deep down mentality. I'm not a city girl. I don't like crowds. I don't like, in New Zealand, it's just, again, a smaller, kind of more casual place. And I think the UK too, people have a wall up a bit more, and they're a bit more, I don't know, everyone seems to be a little bit more themselves. Where in LA, there's this kind of, it's a lot of characters, a lot of people who have come here from other places to be something, and they're convincing you of who they are rather than just being who they are, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's the part that was weird for us, for sure.
It's a lot, but you know what, it's really helped me again hone my intuition. I've been through some really awful shit with people before, so for me, it's really helped me kind of like listen to my gut and my intuition and read people and their energy from a distance before I let them close to me. It's a protection thing, and I feel if I can instantly feel if somebody isn't genuine.
Oh, nice. Which is going to help in LA.
Right.
And with what
It's
you're
a
doing
survival
now.
technique.
That's right. This is a great segue into what you're doing now. I mean, you're doing a lot of things. Let's start off with talking about the shop, the Great Frog.
Right.
Right. So your shop on Melrose, family-owned business. You kind of grew up into this where you're, I mean, professionally, technically, a silversmith, right?
Yes, correct.
Let's talk about the shop.
Sure. So I was actually born above the Great Frog in London. We used to have a shop in a place called Harrow on the Hill on the outskirts of London. At one point back then, the Great Frog started in 1972. My aunt, my uncle, well, my maternal uncle, my paternal aunt, another uncle all started the Great Frog back in the 70s. And then my mother left New Zealand, traveled around South America, and ended up in London after a few years to see her older brothers. She got involved in the Great Frog. And then my father, coming from Florida at the time, went to go see his big sister in London and ended up at the Great Frog. So my parents actually met working together as jewelers and workers at the Great Frog.
Nice.
With their siblings. And then I was literally born, the apartments above the Great Frog was where they all lived. So it was a big, there was probably like 10 people living in there, my cousins, my aunts, uncles, my parents. I was actually born on the floor above the shop.
It's funny, this is who you are. This is in your blood, right?
Right. My dad delivered me on above the Great Frog. So yeah, I was the youngest. I am the youngest of three. So and I'm pretty sure once, they had their third child, my parents were kind of like, London's maybe not the best place to raise a family. And it was getting a pretty full house. So not long after I was born, I think they got letters from the government saying they had to name me. I think they couldn't come up with a name. I was just baby for a while. They had to get a passport sorted, and they via Florida, we ended up back in New Zealand. I think that's where my parents sort of decided it was going to be a great place to raise a family, and my mom's parents were there and everything. So yeah, we ended up back in New Zealand. So for the first like 10 years of my life, jewelry wasn't a part of it. My dad was a mechanic on a golf course. My mom was cleaned houses on the weekend and looked after us kids. And I had, like I said, a barefoot kind of no TV childhood.
What a great childhood, by the way, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. It's magical. So basically, my uncle and aunt, again, who started the Great Frog in London, came to New Zealand, which is where my uncle's originally from, like my mother, to start. They opened a Great Frog and bought a house in New Zealand for a few years just to try and expand and sort of maybe also live a bit of family life. They were over there for a few years and ended up going back to the UK, and they left the Great Frog in Auckland, New Zealand in the hands of a friend who kind of would just hold biker parties there and kind of ran it into the ground, and it didn't kind of just closed its doors. And my parents ended up buying that shop, taking over the lease from my uncle and aunt when they went back to the UK. So I think I was about 10, 11 when that happened. So my parents got back involved in the jewelry business, and they changed the name a bit. They had they kept some molds of some of the earlier Great Frog rings that they'd included in that lease, and then they started making other jewelry and buying in other jewelry. So that shop's still there in Auckland. And I basically grew up working in the shop after school, learning from my dad, helping customers, just that was my after school job from the age of about 13 or 14. So again, I kind of grew up with these stories about the Great Frog and from my past and seeing all the pictures before I was born, but I didn't actually have anything to do with the Great Frog till I was 19 and traveling, and I ended up in London living in the attic above the Great Frog in Soho and working with my uncle there. So I lived and worked at the Great Frog, and that's where when I was 19, where I really, got really into it, and I just loved everything about it, and I kind of wasn't sure what I was going to do with it from there, but years later, ended up kind of pitching the idea, and my cousin helped me open, well, he came over and opened, and just a bunch of us kind of put it together, the Great Frog in LA, which we're coming up on it's been 7.5 years since I've been doing that, and
Wow,
5 years
congrats.
since our shop on Melrose has been open. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we get to the one in LA on Melrose, let's focus on London for a bit.
Sure.
So you were there 18, 19. So is that where you that's where you learned how to make the jewelry, right? The rings,
No, actually before then at my parents' shop.
Oh,
So when I
really?
was
Okay.
yeah, my dad, I mean, I would sit with my dad. He'd teach me how to use all the files and the saws and how to make molds. I would help with, I loved working with my hands, and I loved spending time with my dad. So, I would, yeah, basically probably I was in workshops from the age of about 13. So I
Oh, that's
intrinsically
awesome.
picked up a lot and kind of was working with my hands anyway. And I did actually when I was back in New Zealand at the age of 20, I was at university and I started carving my own wax. So um, yeah, I'd sort of picked up some more skills when I was in London. I came back and was just kind of obsessed, and I would sit in my university lectures and just whittle away at a piece of wax, and I made a few pieces back then.
And so where did you learn, right? Because there's a difference between being a good silversmith, being able to create these things. I think that's the creative part of you that's able to do this on a regular basis. But so then where did you learn the business side of it? Or have
Just
you,
being
right?
thrown in the deep end, really. Yeah, basically, I mean, and there's a difference too. I've noticed in a lot of articles and things, people have used the word that I'm a designer for the Great Frog, which isn't true at all. None of the Great Frog designs are mine. I'm a silversmith for the Great Frog. A lot of the designs have been around since well before I was born.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I have made my own designs on the side, but basically since I've been managing and running a business, which isn't a natural talent to me, basically the creative side and the design side has gone out the window a little bit. That's kind of my goal this year, is to start getting back into that side of things, because bench work and silversmithing is kind of, it's a job for me now. It's work, it hasn't really got that creative side to it, which I really miss. But as you said, business wise, yeah, really, pretty much when we opened the shop in LA, my cousin came out, we did a whole build out, fitted it out, and then he went back to the UK. And 4 days later, I basically spent the next few days getting the signage put up and putting all the jewelry out on the shelves, and just opened the doors. And I've been juggling it since then, hiring people, firing people, managing people, running just every aspect of business in LA, which is really, it's taught me a lot, and it's been extreme and stressful and amazing. And yeah, it's been a journey for sure.
Yeah. How big is the shop? How many employees at any given time?
Currently, I have 6 employees.
And right, running the shop, running something like this, retail, hard work, especially in LA.
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you're seeing on a regular basis?
Oh, they're countless. Just so countless. Well, I mean, it's difficult for one, where it's still, although we're still a small family business, we've really expanded in these last 5-6 years. We never had a website. After being around for 40 odd years, we got online. We have our US stores now, but we're still a family business, and we maybe have bitten off a little more than we could chew. It's kind of expanded a little more than we could handle. I mean, it's handling well for sure, but we grew really quickly in a short space of time. So there's still ironing out kinks, having sort of separate entities and separate countries and communication, and everything's still cast in London and sent to us in raw. So finding jewelers that can, I've got a great team now. Like for the first time, I think everyone I have in the shop is just absolutely solid, into the business, gets along well, great personality. So it makes my life a lot easier. But yeah, there's a lot that comes with it. I would say for me, I'm not naturally a businesswoman, so managing people and all of that kind of side, making sure that the shop is up to a standard that, again, it's my family business, so I do have a really high standard of customer service and work ethic, which in LA is quite hard to come by.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes, so it's been a lot of trial and error, a lot of sleepless nights. I mean, in the beginning, I was the jeweler and the shop floor and everything. So I was literally in the shop sleeping in the back there 7 days a week, and after years of kind of rolling through whatever comes my way, it feels like it's in a really good place right now.
And so let's focus a little bit on what part of it is the business as opposed to working, in the back, creating these things. What percentage is, you said that you're not creating the molds for the most part, but you are working on them. How much time are you spending in the back as opposed to running the business?
These days, I don't know, it's a pretty good mix up. I probably spend more time running the business than I do on the bench these days.
And is that the way you would have it, or do you want it to be one more than the other?
I much prefer, I'm not on the shop floor so much these days. I don't really, I've kind of burnt out a little bit on being on the shop floor, maybe a little bit because my sort of online presence has and people know where I work have allowed
that's something I want to talk about for sure.
Right, me easy access and for people to sort of, which is great. I've almost everyone who kind of comes into the shop wanting to meet me or talk to me is an amazing person, but I have work to do, so it's a lot of like, hey, cool, like look at my motorcycle and chat and this and that, which is great, but I also I'm there sort of running a business, so I kind of definitely, there was a certain point that I was like, okay, I need to just back off a little bit from the shop floor because it's a bit overwhelming. But you know what, the bench work is really hard work. It's a lot of heavy hand work, and I've been doing that for years, and a lot of it's again, like when you kind of, your work is how do I say this, when you're kind of working with your hands a lot, and it is not so much a creative thing, my bench became work. It wasn't enjoyable for me in that same way. So I would spend my time after hours or on my day off, I would go spend time at the bench just doing my own things, which I've started to do more lately, which I'm really enjoying. Again, sort of just finding a balance of being able to put my own creativity into my work as well.
So are we going to see some of your own work at the Great Frog, or is it going to be a separate little thing, the things that you create?
That's something we're talking about. It depends. It depends on what comes out when I when I start designing that, if it fits the aesthetic. I'm sure that's something my cousin would love for my designs to be Great Frog pieces. And if they turn out to be something that doesn't fit the aesthetic, then I would have something of my own line.
That's awesome. Obviously keep us informed. We love what you're doing, but now let's transition a little bit to, right, you're on the bench sometimes, you're running the business, you're a model.
There's a lot of behind the scenes. Yes, exactly.
How much time are you modeling? It sounds like it's a little bit of a side hustle every once in a while type of thing.
Right.
Tell us about it. What are you doing now?
Basically, it kind of started very organically. I've never had an agent. I don't go to castings or anything like that. Basically, I think just a combination of my presence at the Great Frog. Before we opened our Melrose shop, I was managing a store called Trico, which was Dice Magazine, the Great Frog, and it was Dixie to start with, which was a clothing brand. So we actually opened that, I think I was 22 when I started managing that. And so the combination of me having this presence and I guess being involved in motorcycles, people just started asking if they could take my picture. There was, I was working Born Free event. I used to work for them early days, and a photographer, Marcus Cuff, asked if he could shoot me, and that ended up being on the cover of Tattoo magazine. And ever since then, I kind of just word of mouth, people would reach out, and over the last 5 years, 6 years or so, it's just been great. I don't really have to put myself out there. People come to me, which is great. I don't have an agent. I turn down anything that's not really, doesn't feel authentic or true to me. And that's great. I think for a long period of time, I was turning down work that I didn't feel was really how I wanted to put myself out there. And it's managed to curate it into kind of everything that comes my way, really. It tends to be like, oh, cool, we just want you to wear the clothes you would normally wear and do your thing, pretend the camera's not here. And I'm like, great, that's easy,
That's a great position to be in, right? To be able to turn down things that you don't feel are, part of who you are or what you want to do.
Right. And I think I'm lucky to be able to make those choices because, again, unlike a lot of people, I didn't come to LA to be a model. I have a full-time job. I don't need that extra income, but I enjoy it. You know, all the jobs I take on are fun for me, you know, and they're often through friends or people I've met through the motorcycle field who I've gotten to know. And most of the jobs I get are, you know, word of mouth through another job that I've worked with or people that I've worked with. And, you know, it's a hobby for me. It's something I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a sec. Obviously, it looks like you're enjoying yourself, but to me anyway, and right, this is the first time we've had a conversation, but I've been following your stuff for a little bit. It feels like you're a little bit, what's the reluctant to be like this celebrity, right?
I'm pretty uncomfortable with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about that. Why?
Um, I guess again, it's not something I intended for myself. It puts me out there for public scrutiny, and again, I'm a very private person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, I'm in a city where there's so many people clawing for attention.
Yes.
And it does, you know, I'm not really that comfortable with that level of attention, especially more and more with social media. It kind of irks me quite a lot. The way that the direction it's heading in, and I keep a lot of it to myself. You know, I don't want to spend time promoting myself. I don't, you know, I find it's much less pressure, and I'm a lot happier when I just go with the flow. And I don't, you know, I haven't actually worked to kind of hone my career in any direction in that way. I'm just and sometimes I beat myself up about it. I'm like, I really should have jumped on that horse and pushed myself more to do this and that. But you know, I'm really happy with where I'm at and what comes my way. And yeah, it's again, it's not a path I sought out for myself. It kind of fell in my lap, and I enjoy it as a hobby. But it's not, you know, again, it's not my number one. You know.
Sure. Well, that's funny because it all kind of seemed to blow up from our perspective anyway when you were on the first episode of what is it, Ride with Norman Reedus, the guy from The
Yes.
Walking Dead, right? He has
Yes.
this motorcycle show. He's just kind of meeting cool people, riding with them,
Right.
which is a pretty big deal, right? He's obviously has a very popular show, and then he's doing
Right.
this motorcycle show. And were you the first episode?
Yes.
And so now, like all of this, the spotlight, which kind of you don't care so much about, now it's on you, right? You became,
Right.
you were on a lot of people's radar at that point. Tell us
Right.
the transition. Once that episode came out, what did your
That was
life look like
basically
from
when I
the
started
set?
hiding in the back of the shop.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was amazing for business as well. You know, it put the Great Frog on the map in America for sure. I mean, we have a history in the UK where people had known the name for many years as an underground kind of store, but that
Yeah.
was
And
the
by the way,
first time.
real quick before we get into that, I mean,
Yeah.
you're right. You had bands like Metallica, Motorhead, right? All these, you're not a
Right.
little tiny shop. I mean, some of your
No.
clients were huge, big deals.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, just to go back to that, I mean, but back in the day, you know, again, we never advertised we're an underground jewelry shop, one of the first to be doing skull rings. And, you know, any big rock and roll band in the 70s, 80s would, when they stopped through London on tour, they would go to the Great Frog, get a skull ring, hang out and party with my uncle, jam on the guitars. You know, so he's you know, he's friends with a lot of those people, and it was kind of, you know, it's this underground thing. No one really knew where all these pieces came from. They were just in posters and photos from rock and rollers back in the day, and now people can kind of put a face to the brand. You know, like you know, we've got this picture of like Cliff from Metallica, and he's got both his fists up, and both the rings he's wearing are Great Frog rings.
Nice.
And we have that picture up in the shop, and the amount of people that come in and, oh, I had this poster on my bedroom wall when I was a kid. Like I had no idea where these rings came from.
That's
and
awesome.
It's all the same place, you know.
And so from this underground kind of shop to being in the spotlight after the show with Norman, was that a good thing or a bad thing? Obviously good for business, but
Right.
we talked about this, you being a little bit uncomfortable with it. Would you do it again if that presented itself?
Oh, for sure. I had so much fun, you know. And again, like I said, it hasn't been negative attention, you know. It's all well-meaning, lovely people who are usually just really into motorcycles. And you know, a lot of people, especially of a certain generation in like middle of America, hadn't really come across a young female who rode big Harley Davidsons. Sure. And that was kind of like a really wow, I just want to, when I pass through LA, let's go to that shop and meet that girl, which has been really cool. And, I have, I have no complaints for sure.
The let's talk about that part of it as well, right? You're young, you're attractive, you're riding big bikes, right? You're running the shop there in LA. Are you taken seriously by a lot of these people that, big biker culture, right? Big tough guys. What does that look like for you on a regular basis?
I've been really lucky, again, I think a part of it is because um, I have tried hard to hone myself in a certain way. Like I said, I did turn down a certain amount of work. I mean, I have no problem with, you know, I have no problem with the kind of the sort of image of girl. I mean, there was definitely a time when this sort of, even before the Norman Reedus show came out, where most of the girls you would see on motorcycles, it was before this whole women motorcycling culture blew up. Most of what you would see would be, the horse magazine, and it would be, a girl in a bikini, like spreading her legs, bending over a bike, which I have no problem with, but that's just never been me. And I've always been a bit of a tomboy. I've always been want to, run around, tackle, fucking play around. Never really followed any of the girly footsteps. And anything I see that's a challenge, I kind of want to jump on and do it. So I think I've been lucky that I'm taken pretty seriously. I think, I haven't come across any kind of degrading words. I handle myself pretty well. I know I'm a good rider, and I don't put myself out there in a way that I think is open to major criticism. And again, it's not curated. I'm just trying to be myself, and I don't like being put into a box. I've tried quite hard not to be pigeonholed into any kind of category. I just,
Yeah, it's funny. You're not. I think, right, and this is me from the outside looking in. The reason that I think you are taken seriously is because people can see that this is your life. This is, I mean, this is not. You're not putting on the leather and the helmet and all that stuff for a photo shoot, and then you kind of go home in your Prius, right? I mean, you're living this life, and I think people can see it. And I hate this word, but it gets thrown because it gets thrown out of there a lot. But you're authentic to this lifestyle and this culture. It feels like.
Right. I mean, yeah. I've always had an affinity for older vehicles. Has been many periods in the last years that my only running vehicle has been a motorcycle, and rain or shine, luckily a lot in California. I ride most days, I ride to work. I do it for the joy of it. I love riding. It makes me happy, so yeah, I think people can see that. I think, and especially in this day and age where, again, there is, like anything, I think I've always avoided scenes. If something's popular, I kind of go the other way. And as soon as I started getting put into the box of like when it blew up, this women motorcycling scene, I've retreated a little bit, because again, it's not the reasons I got into it. I just really love riding, and I've met some great girls through it, but I don't really see myself as a part of the scene.
Yeah, well, a lot of magazines, a lot of articles have certainly put you in the scene, and not just in the scene, but being an ambassador or leader for this female biker culture. Do you not see yourself that way?
No.
No.
Not at all. I think it was just time, place, everything, again, like back in 2011, having, I was literally at work, and someone would come by, and I was at Trico, oh, let me take a picture of you on this bike or whatever, and that kind of thing. And it kind of just started going around that way, and slowly I saw this kind of more and more women, getting into riding, which was sort of unheard of at the time. It was so rare to find it. I hadn't really met anyone who did. So yeah, it kind of all around that time started. A few years later, it started sort of blowing up, and definitely, I was put in with all of that, and I have no issues with that, but it's not really how I see myself, if you know what I mean.
So because you're in the lifestyle and you're doing these things with the work that you do with the shop, right? A lot of people find that very appealing, very attractive, right? We want to be free on a bike. We want to just be carefree for the most part, right? On a beautiful bike. And I think that the people that can and want to, right, they're considered these like weekend warriors, right? They have a bike, but they go out on the weekends. but then they're
Right.
going back to their 9 to 5, which is, they're a dentist
Right.
or whatever. Is there a mix? I mean, can both those worlds coexist, or is it one or the other?
I think both those worlds can coexist. Definitely. I mean, I say to each their own. If you do what you can, and if writing makes you happy, and you've also got your, everyone has responsibilities. I mean, there's very few people I think who are lucky enough to be able to just, uh, you know, have freedom and ride motorcycles all the time. And that's a balance we all find. That life is up and down. Not everything's never perfect. Things might be great for a while, and things are always going to drop out. And you've worked your way up. It's never steady. That's a hard lesson I've had to learn. That it's a roller coaster. Life, you can't just get to a level where everything's perfect and it's going to stay that way.
So to each his own. I like that. I like that quite a bit. Now,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have no
uh,
judgment.
yeah, I
Whatever you
like
want to
that.
ride. People in LA especially, there's a kind of thing, like, oh, old Harley Davidsons are what's cool. And it's, this like, oh, you can't ride with us if you're on this or that. I don't care. I loved working with Scrambler Ducati. I loved working with Harley Davidson. I love riding pretty much every motorcycle I've ever ridden on. I've had a great time. So I no judgment from me at all.
What's your personal bike? What are you riding right now?
Right now I have actually both my bikes right now are Harleys. I have an FXR and I have a Sportster.
Do you have a dream bike?
I'd love. I Speaking of, I actually really do want to get myself an old Harley. I would love to get myself a shovel or a panhead. My dad used to ride a panhead, and that bike is now in London. I got to ride it a couple of years ago. My cousin owns it now, and I am hoping one day I can get that bike back over to the US and it will be mine. We'll see.
Very nice. That'd be great. Now,
But
as we start to
sorry,
kind of wrap this up a little bit,
right.
I want to. One of the things that was a little bit touching and actually kind of cool to read was that, I mean, growing up, you're really close to your dad. I mean, throughout your life, right? And he was
Yes.
the one that was kind of got you into the bikes and the
Right.
jewelry and all those things. Let's talk a little bit about him. What kind of influence did he have to your life? I mean, right now you are where you are because of the things that you learned there with him.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, like I said, I have a really close knit family. Um, my dad is just a very unique human being. He's one of those people that you couldn't help when you met him. Just he's just an interesting, calm kind of wizard person. He was just like he'd figured it out. He'd figured out the secret to life, and he
Nice.
had this attitude that was just, he saw everything. He found the positive in anything, and he was just fun and encouraging and silly and adventurous, and I think I've always aspired. I followed him around everywhere. I was daddy's girl. We had a man cave workshop in the basement, and he was always building, making, fixing. He built a whole house, and I tagged around and learned whatever I could from him. And yeah, he's been a huge inspiration for me in everything that I do. My whole attitude to life is all I aspire to be is his, that kind of mentality that he had, because it worked wonders.
I love it. That's a lovely story. As somebody who grew up without a dad, and now I have my own. I have 3 kids. I have a little
Oh
girl
wow.
as well, and I mean
Cool.
that's something that would be amazing to continue to, grow that relationship as they get into their teens and
Right.
20s, and so congratulations for the relationship you had with him. I know.
Thank you.
I think he recently passed away,
Yes.
and that
This year it'll be 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
And so with the things that you learned from your dad, from your uncle, from the things that you've done in the past, for people that are kind of, and not just even in the motorcycle scene or anything like that, just life in general, for those that are trying to kind of be better, do better, live the kind of lifestyle that you're living, whatever that means for them, what kind of advice do you have for them?
I would say my advice would be, don't care what other people think,
I
man,
love
especially in this day and age. Don't look at the internet. Don't compare yourself to
it.
others. Don't try to be what you see as cool, or find what really speaks to you. I think we all lose out on our intuition in this day and age. The more we kind of look outside of ourselves, I think the more lost you get. And I've seen it happen to so many people that have been amazing people, you know, and I'd say just really, you know, even if, like you said right at the beginning of this conversation, that it's scary, you know, it really is scary, but you have to follow your heart. You know, I did a lot of things and followed a lot of paths that weren't right for me, and I felt they weren't, and I broke free and dropped everything, and, you know, moved to another country, or quit this or started that, you know. And it's never an easy decision to make, but you know when you've made the right one, you know. And it might be scary, but the more scary stuff you do, to be honest, the stronger you are, and the better you are at handling yourself. I like to just throw myself in the deep end and see how I go, and, you know, I learn something every time, and every time I do something new, it's better and it's more exciting, and I'm not afraid anymore, you know.
I love that advice. Great advice. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Yeah,
it could be scary, but you're living proof. You're living it. You're doing it. You seem
right.
very happy,
And
very
you
with it.
know, I think from a distance, I think a lot of people assume that it's easy, you know, or that things have been handed to me, and it's not the case at all. I think you make life work for you, and you know, when I look back, you know, like anyone, I can be pretty hard on myself, and then, you know, I can look back and definitely see that a lot of the hardest things, or the worst things I've been through, have just really made me stronger, you know.
I love it. When we have you back on the show in 3 years, what are we going to be talking about? Career wise, just life wise, all that good stuff.
I would hope in 3 years' time that I would have my own line of jewelry, and have a creative, more of a creative aspect balanced in my life. I would maybe not be living in Los Angeles anymore. I'm not sure about that yet. I don't know. Could be anywhere. I don't have a 5-year plan. I don't have any kind of plan. I just go where it takes me.
I love that you don't have a plan. Just we'll see.
Not at
Who
all.
knows, right?
Right. I you know, I don't keep any of my doors open and closed. Like, if there's an opportunity that feels right, I'll take it. If, you know, we'll see. I don't like knowing what the future is. I like surprises.
Well, we're looking forward to continuing to following your career, your success, the modeling, the shop, everything that you're doing. We're big fans. We really appreciate you being on the show. For those that want to, you know, maybe reluctantly on your end, want to get to know you a little bit more, want to follow you on social media, website, all that good stuff, where can we find you online?
Right. Online, you can find my Instagram account. It's at Imogenicide, which is basically a crude
Sure.
variation of my name. I, for actually years now, I've been meaning to set up a website again. Not a priority, but this year I'm hoping I will launch it, of just basic, you know, a little bit of what I'm doing and what I'm about, and perhaps when I, you know, do start doing other things, it'll be on there. So actually have the title, it will be imogenicide.com when that does get launched, and I'm sure I'll announce it when it happens. But yeah, if you want to look at the Great Frog LA, it's just Instagram is at the Great Frog LA.
Perfect. So Outliers, you can go to outlierhq.com. That's outlierhq.com. First of all, subscribe to the podcast, rate, review it, share with your friends. But then you're going to find the social media links, the websites, to the shop, to Imogen's social media accounts. Feel free to share. She's the real deal. She's wonderful. And she's just kind of living the life that most of us want to live. So again, Imogen, this has been amazing. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, for your words of wisdom, and for just being you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ever. It's been awesome.
Outliers, we'll talk to you tomorrow.